All right, Jimmy Ott and Paul Stone. We're now set for the college football semifinals. Thursday, the Fiesta Bowl at Miami and Ole Miss. Friday, the Peach Bowl with Oregon and Indiana. Just what we expected, huh? The 10 and 6 seeds, 5 and the 1. So it's Indiana, and still trying to get used to Indiana as that number 1 overall seed. And, well, guess what? Indiana and Texas Tech hitting it pretty big early on in the transfer portal, as well as the college football calendar is so well done. But anyway, the Miami and Ole Miss winning outright as underdogs at Bet Rivers right now. Paul, it is Miami 3.5 in 52. I just want to make this first. An Ole Miss outgained Georgia by 130 yards. The best player on the field, in my opinion. You can. I didn't prep you for this, but I think he's the best player in college football right now. And that might get some people in Indiana upset and things like that. But if you're playing at a higher level than Trinidad Chambliss, I want to see it. And this wasn't just Tulane's defense that he put up some numbers against. I mean, this was Georgia's defense, and I saw them go to Athens and compete with Georgia and open the game with 5 scoring drives. There's 5 sustained scoring drives. So fell behind, had the defensive score, which are hard to overcome, and still won the game by 5 in the Superdome. As expected, about 2-1 Ole Miss to Georgia fans because it's a lot fresher for them. Maybe a lot of Georgia fans, maybe, well, we'll skip this trip and maybe we'll go out to Phoenix for the semifinals. And, it's just not as novel as it is for the Ole Miss fans. So they really gave their team a home field advantage as well. And we constantly try and monitor the impact of not having Lane Kiffin on the sideline. And I thought it was a little bit clunky. You couldn't tell against Tulane as far as there was no resistance that could test the level of execution on the offense. They just completely overpowered them in that game for the second time this season. But this one, with the big stage, Golding had a couple of hiccups in game management, had to burn a timeout, had to get a pre-snap penalty here and there. But for the most part, look, he grew up in a football family. He's very comfortable on a sideline. So, and with experience in managing game, he's going to be fine. And he picked this right spot to go for it on 4th down. But you know what? Also, what just surprised me in that game, how many times on 3rd down, Paul, that Ole Miss's defense stopped Georgia. I'm gonna pull it up right here to be exact, but 3rd downs. I mean, they had 9 different stops, 9 stops on 3rd down by the Ole Miss defense against Georgia's offense, and that's there's been little bit of differences in these Lane Kiffin era rosters for Ole Miss, but usually the offense is way ahead of the defense. Last year's defense, that roster was probably the best. But damn it, 9 stops on 3rd down. Man, are they getting a little bit better? Is this Steve Fisher, Glenn Rice sort of magic starting to happen for the Ole Miss Rebels? Whatever the case is, I think they got the best player on the field. As far as the Miami Hurricanes, I don't think it was any fluke. Now, the only fluke was maybe the rust factor, and the team with the bye is now 1-7 in these these 2 years, this quarterfinal round. Last year's a little bit misleading because many of the teams with the bye were the underdog. Not this year, only one of those, and that was Texas Tech against Oregon, and they had more problems in rust in that one. But Miami built a comfortable lead. But then when Ohio State got the ball back with 1-score game, down 17-14, Miami got it right back, got a turnover, and basically killed the clock and out-bullied the bully, running it down their throat to end the game. Miami is 3.5 and 52, Paul.
Yeah, I'll tell you. First of all, you're talking about Trinidad Chambliss. I'm with you there, and I think these 4 semifinalists. I think 3 of the teams, not to knock Carson Beck, he's managed the last 5 or 6 games for Miami very effectively. Hadn't been turning the ball over, and he's one of the main reasons the Canes have made it to this point. But those other 3 quarterbacks, I mean, you look at Indiana's Fernando Mendoza, the Heisman Trophy winner. Then Oregon's Dante Moore, the level that he's playing at down the stretch. And then, of course, the aforementioned Trinidad Chambliss. And Chambliss might be the best of the bunch right now, but man, we got three really good quarterbacks playing at a high level remaining in this tournament.
Don't forget Mendoza. I mean,
Right. I started with Mendoza, the
oh, I'm
Heisman
sorry. Well,
Trophy winner.
Beck is. I thought you mentioned Beck first because Beck. I thought some people saying he managed the game. He made some. I thought in the first half he made some plays, especially on third down. Found Daniels converted with his feet one time, so to keep these drives going. And then the second half he did manage the game. So situationally, kind of shifted gears a little bit. So I'm no, Beck is doing just fine. I thought he played a very solid game on Friday on New Year's Eve.
Yeah, he's doing what they ask him to do without question. One of the main, I think, storylines surrounding this game is who's gonna coach for Ole Miss as far as the assistants. And a story early this morning, of course, it's been expected, and I guess everything's still on the table and anything could happen. But it appears that Charlie Weiss Jr. Will call plays for the Rebels on Thursday night, and then running backs Coach Kevin Smith will also apparently be present, according to a story that I read this morning. Some of the other coaches, tight end coach, co-offensive coordinator Joe Cox, receivers coach, passing game coordinator George McDonald, not expected to coach for Ole Miss as they've gone to LSU and are employed by the Tigers at this point. So, Pete Golding's been good. He's handled it exactly as he should, saying it will have no impact on the game. That they will do their preparation, and it's not that big of a deal. So we'll see how it turns out. But I'm going to look at a lot of matchups in this game, and I think that's what it comes down to, obviously, in many football games. But Ole Miss is very good at protecting the quarterback, and one of the reasons they're good at protecting the quarterback is the fact that they have a quarterback who can move around, who's got good feet, who's got that elusiveness. But Ole Miss, top 10 in sacks allowed percentage, only 3.1% of their passing plays end in a sack. That ranks them 7th nationally, have only allowed 18 sacks all year, and only 13 times has Trinidad Chambliss been sacked. The other sacks came when Austin Simmons was starting for Ole Miss in those first couple of games. But this is going to be a critical matchup. How does Ole Miss neutralize or not neutralize Miami's pass rush? Miami, of course, one of the sack leaders nationally, 46 sacks on the year. Akeem Mesidor, 10.5 sacks. Reuben Bain, 8.5 sacks. They average 3.4 sacks a game to rank 3rd nationally. So you've got a team that rushes the passer very effectively against a team, Ole Miss, that doesn't give up a whole lot of sacks. And I think this is where Trinidad Chambliss is really going to come into play. He has not been running the ball as much down the stretch. You look at the early part of the season, there was a 4-game stretch in September, first Saturday in October, a 4-game stretch where he had 54 carries. So he's averaging 13.5 carries a game. They're really relying on his legs, maybe not that confident in him at that point as a passer. But he, again, logged 13.5 carries a game, 54 carries, had 62 yards rushing against Arkansas, 112 in the first meeting against Tulane, and 71 against LSU during the month of September. So he was running the ball a lot. But down the stretch, it's been a little bit different. He hadn't carried the ball nearly as much. He's been averaging, I've got it here somewhere, less than half that. He averaged, again, the 13.5 carries a game, a little over 6 carries a game the last 5 games. So they have really been relying heavily on his arm more so than his legs. But I think this is a game that they're going to have some designed runs, not only the off script where the pocket collapses and he uses his maneuverability, his legs and his feet to get away, but they're going to have design runs because they're going to be bringing that rush from the edge. And as you know, if you've got a running quarterback who can bust up the middle on design quarterback draws and other similar plays, you can make the opposing team think twice about pinning their ears back and coming with that all-out rush. So I think Trinidad Chambliss is going to run the football some against Miami, and I think he's probably going to be effective doing that. Talked about his passing as they've gone more to that the last 5 games. Last 5 games for the Rebels, he's 131 out of 177 attempts, 74% completion rate. So he's completing almost 3/4 of his passes these last 5. He's averaged a little over 327 yards passing a game his last 5, a little over 9 yards an attempt, 11 touchdowns to 1 interception in those last 5 games. So as you mentioned, he's playing at such a high level, and I think Ole Miss is kind of the forgotten team here. And certainly they've got a lot of coverage concerning their unique coaching dynamics that are in play. It's just a sign of the times, the calendar that you mentioned that college football currently operates by that needs to be fixed. But I just wonder, kind of flipping it around, his Lane Kiffin's exit perhaps galvanized the Rebels, has it maybe brought them closer together and provided an extra layer of determination and focus. And that might be the case. But this is a talented football team. And I think a lot of people maybe to this point have been sleeping a little bit on the Rebels. But I like Ole Miss here plus 3.5. I think they're going to beat Miami outright. So I like Ole Miss plus the points.
Historically, through a bunch of different quarterbacks at the different schools, Lane Kiffin has rushed his quarterback an average of about 10 times a game. And Paul, you're accurate there when you talk about early when Chambliss came in. And you even had some of the people talk about, well, he was a better runner and this and that. And well, I I know we said on this podcast when they were getting ready for that LSU game, like, he's a way better passer than Simmons, and and that's what so many college teams are putting athletes at quarterback and trying to develop them, hope they develop as a passer. And when you don't have to give up a man and hand the ball off traditionally and play 10 on 11, you run the quarterback, you blocking 10 instead blocking with 10 instead of 9. But he has, kind of gotten more and less as a runner. He was up to, like, 14, 15, 14, almost averaging 15 rushes a game for a stretch early, and it has calmed down. We'll throw out Citadel because they we're gonna take an approach there. He rushed it 2 times, so that's an outlier. But that number's come cut about in half. Maybe we're seeing, like, 6 and 7 rushing attempts. And there's been a lot of times a key situation, 3rd and 10 in the middle of the season, they just call it, he get it, and he would get down, and he's just such a weapon, running the football. Dual threat, some kind of way, has been was evolved into running quarterback. But he's a true dual threat. When you got one, and he throws the ball in the pocket, but he also, as we saw down the Superdome against Georgia, when it breaks down, he's running. He's extremely elusive. You name your guy, man. If it's Johnny Manziel back at the college level, whatever it is, he's got some of that in him, and so I don't see a player that is playing at a higher level in college football right now. Forget the stars, forget his background, and I'll take another one. Jackson Dart he's he's the future for the New York Giants. Got interrupted with injury a little bit. Got to get down more. Got to learn to not take as many hits. He takes ways too many hits at the with the Giants this year. But his 3rd season starting at Ole Miss under Kiffin, and Chambliss's first year starting this year on the hop when he didn't get a bulk of the reps with the starters in August camp, and then before he started that first game against Arkansas, all the numbers are pretty close, minus his interceptions are cut in half. And that's year 3 for Dart in the system, as opposed to the first year with limited reps. So he is just really, really, he's something special. And this whole thing is galvanized. They sure look like it to me. I mean, there's still, a little bump here and there, maybe a hesitation to go for it on 4th down, not going for it on 4th down as much. Kiffin was, the leader of the pack in that approach there. But I'm with you. I'm with you, Paul. And now all of a sudden, getting a little help on defense, something about it. There's no doubt. And look, enough of pretty much every assistant that they need is on staff, minus Kiffin. Every assistant has been allowed to return to the team besides Kiffin. So we know the deal there. But it is damn is soften the blow, absorb the blow about as much as possible. And the Rebels are a tough out, a tough out. So I respect the heck out of what Miami did to Ohio State. We had I mean, what handicapper didn't have Ohio State power rated as a top team in college football? And that wasn't a fluke win doing it in Dallas. So I think it's going to be a great game. I'll take any points as well with you, Paul. I'll jump on the Rebels plus the 3.5. All right, we'll move on into a second before I give you this read real quick and as I pull it up. But don't forget, log into your Bet Rivers account each day of a college football playoff game to receive a same game parlay profit boost valid for any college football playoff game. See the app for more details. Indiana and Oregon in Atlanta. 3.5 and 47 currently at the Bet Rivers. In the Hoosiers, well, they said it was a historical line against Alabama. It was a historical beating that they gave Alabama. And so I hit on that one last weekend. But in Oregon, well, the one we didn't hit, I'm still a little bit stunned how manhandled Texas Tech was against Oregon. You saw the final score. It was way worse than the final score down in Miami. My goodness, that was ugly. With how Oregon handled Texas Tech, we talked about it a lot. Talk is cheap. You hear these coaches. Oh, we're going to be aggressive on defense. We're going to be physical. We're going to be this and that. We're going to attack the field, vertically. We can all that. Lanning said he wanted to turn the very ultra finesse oriented Oregon Duck offense into a line of scrimmage team. Good luck. He has, because that's a pretty good line of scrimmage team that they pushed around on New Year's morning down in Miami. So here come the Hoosiers again, 3.5 and 47. And Signetti, boy, I loved his expression on the sidelines when DeBoer in Alabama tried the oldest trick in the book. They try it because sometimes they still jump. Fourth and less than 5, going on a long count. We'll just take 5 or burn a timeout, but we're not going to go for it. We're just going to take a free swing. He looked at him like, man, go try that somewhere else. It fueled him. But I'm not getting in front of this train. I think Dante Moore of a very modest statistical day against Texas Tech. I still thought he looked very comfortable, Larry poised, and was accurate in the early stages of the game when they needed him to be and move the ball against a really good defense. But this Hoosiers team is complete. They are not phased by the stage. They expect to be here, and they are just ready to play. They're just so well coached. Period. They are buttoned up. I'm going to lay the points here, Paul, about -3.5 with the Hoosiers against the Oregon Ducks in this one.
Yeah, I mean, you started off talking about the domination of Oregon of Texas Tech, and that just caught me completely by surprise as well. It was like I like to say sometimes it looked like the sixth grade playing the fifth grade. I mean, Texas Tech offensively, you just knew before the ball was snapped that they would be, fortunate to gain 3 yards, 4 yards on the play. So totally outclassed there. These teams obviously meeting for the second time this season, Jimmy. Indiana in that first meeting, a 7-point dog at Autzen Stadium when they traveled there to Eugene to play Oregon back the second Saturday in October. In that game, the Oregon, as you recall, they tied it up about 2 minutes and change into the final quarter. Brandon Finney Jr. Intercepted a Fernando Mendoza pass, returned it 35 yards for a touchdown. So Oregon ties the game at 20 early in the fourth quarter. And what does Indiana do? They respond like a champion. They drive 75 yards in 12 plays for the go-ahead eventual game-winning score, win the game 30-20. Nothing flukish about Indiana's victory at Oregon. To me, that was kind of the wake-up call to me as a handicapper. I'd kind of been holding Indiana at arm's length, maybe not completely buying into that point, but that was what got me on the Kirk Signetti train, just watching Indiana go on the road to such a difficult venue known for the decibel levels that the fans can attain there in a relatively smaller, 55, 60,000 seat stadium. They can really rock that place. But the Ducks only had 267 yards in that first meeting, 4.2 yards per play, only 3 of 14 on third down. And Oregon didn't score an offensive touchdown in that game in the final 3 quarters. So the final 3 quarters, Oregon didn't score an offensive touchdown. So really impressive in that first meeting was Indiana's defense, especially in the final two quarters. The Ducks only 64 yards on 27 plays in the final 30 minutes, only 2.4 yards per play. So, what will round two look like? That's the big question. Obviously, these teams come in to a rematch with some new looks and some new motion and new personnel groupings and things like that. Obviously, Oregon, Dan Lanning's not going to sit back and go in with the exact same. I mean, they're going to have to do what they do well. They're not going to, just all of a sudden be a different team. But at the same time, he's going to show them some different looks and some different angles, some different motions again, so forth and so on. So it's just going to be, it's such an intriguing game. And it's a difficult handicap in my mind. Both these teams playing so well, both teams off such an impressive victory. I mean, you mentioned Indiana. You talk about a changing of the guard, just total domination of Alabama, 38-3 victory. It seemed like Alabama's spirit was pretty much broken early in the second quarter, maybe even earlier. It's difficult to sit there. Now, we all have a little bit of historian in us, and even recent history. Alabama's been so good, and to say, man, Indiana's not only the superior team, these teams aren't even in the same class. So it was total domination by Indiana, and pretty much the same Oregon over Texas Tech, 23-0 final. Oregon only led 6-0 at half, I believe, but it seemed like Tech was on the ropes the whole first half, and Oregon finished the job in the second half. Again, both these defenses played well, exceptionally well. Indiana holds the tide to just 193 yards. Oregon limits Texas Tech, a high-flying offense, to only 215 yards. Again, Dante Moore, I think he's a guy who's really improved as the years gone on. He really hadn't played a whole lot of football. He started his true freshman year at UCLA.
4 games.
Yeah, and then didn't play a ton as a starter there, and then transfers last year to Oregon, and obviously is on the bench, pretty much the entire year. Doesn't get much meaningful action at all. So it would be natural for him to progress during the course of the season, but he has progressed clearly into one of the nation's top quarterbacks. He's really hit a groove. But like you, man, it is just difficult to fade Kirk Cignetti and the Hoosiers. I hate to get maybe not mushy, but I hate to use the term a team of destiny, but they just seem like their trajectory is just, it's just a game at a time, but it seems like their end goal, their end destination is a national championship until further notice. So I like not as much as the Ole Miss selection on a little bit lower level, but I'll take Indiana minus 3.5 to defeat Oregon in the Peach Bowl Friday night there in Atlanta.
Let's take a look at the future odds as they're limited right now with only 4 teams remaining available at Bet Rivers. But Paul, any opinion? Of course, Indiana is the big favorite now, down to plus 120. It was at plus 130. I thought that was low to begin with, but it's kind of like Indiana even money, a little plus money, and then everybody else. Any thoughts on the futures board currently at Bet Rivers?
You know, not really a strong opinion. Indiana at plus 120, probably better just to play them in the semifinal game and the final game, whether it be money line or, laying the points. But not a strong opinion. Ole Miss might have a little bit of attractiveness there because at plus 575 to win the national championship there at Bet Rivers, if they win their semifinal game and get into the finals, then you have the ability to hedge that play and make a profit if you're into that sort of approach to sports betting. So, Ole Miss at that number might be the most attractive of the four, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's hard for me to with two highly competitive games to take just plus 120 with Indiana, but it's hard for me to pick against Indiana. This is not going to do it. They have everything, and even with losing, they really didn't. Now look, Alabama's rushing offense is not going to really test the interior line a ton. We've seen enough of a sample size for that this season. Um, but the early signs is that they are not devastated by the big interior lineman being out in the celebration for the Big Ten championship. They just don't beat themselves. One penalty committed. Now listen, hey, Miami, 0 penalties on New Year's Eve also, so very disciplined as well. Sometimes they've gotten a little bit counterproductive with some of their style of play historically, and it's made that the job tougher than it has to be. But highly disciplined, and most of these games they're just not as heavily officiated by what I mean. They don't. They're not throwing as many flags. Period. I mean, Alabama and Indiana had just one penalty, accepted penalty apiece. So you see them sort of that we see in the NFL playoffs. Same with college football playoffs, as far as they let them play a little bit more. Some of the more experienced officiating crews. But the thing is, Indiana, they just don't miss assignments. They don't miss blocks. They just execute at a high level. I know it's cliche, but they do it. They're physical. They're improved from last year. And if it comes a time, like you pointed to, when he throws a pick six in Eugene, it's tied up and all the crowd's going crazy. Mendoza has responded. When Penn State takes the lead in Happy Valley, that first Saturday in November, he takes them down the field and overcomes a sack to start that drive, and they win that game. So the game was tied at Iowa City. He makes a play, about a 50-yard touchdown to end that game. So you have a playmaker when called upon, when needed as well. He hasn't been needed a ton over the course of this season. They dominate people, but the stage does not phase this team, and that's the thing I like about them the most. And I just trust them. They're an honest team. They're a dependable team. And sometimes we don't know, especially in college, how is a team going to accept, they're going to follow through in a state of celebration. Man, that's maybe modern day football. We got to go back to the 50s and early 60s for Ole Miss, but they've got more teams with historical, more national championships in Georgia. But right now, they're the clear top program in the SEC, and they beat them on the biggest stage. Well, they celebrate. They got the stage out there prematurely at the end of that game. But I mean, and then they're supposed to go back home, pack the bags, and go out to Phoenix in less than a week and play again. So it's a tough turnaround. Maybe it's so quick that they don't have time to celebrate and be patted on the back and poke their chests out on campus as maybe in the usual situation where we kind of fade those emotional wins. You'd have that much less on the field. So I just think that Indiana is just prepared, and maybe a little bit of a taste of the college football playoff last year, a little bit of success last year. But it's Signetti. Whatever he's preaching, it's working because they are buttoned up whenever they play. Even when they got pushed around against Notre Dame, even when they got pushed around last year against Ohio State, it wasn't like they were making all kinds of foolish mistakes. They had a special teams mistake or two in that Ohio State game. But Signetti's the glue to me, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible, to have a guy, and this is what we love, I think, about college sports in general, but we're talking college football, so we'll apply it to our favorite sport here. But we just love stories like Kirk Signetti. He's a guy who's polarizing. He comes in, and he talks about how successful he's been, and you can Google it. And if you look at his first appearance, I guess the day he was hired, or maybe the day after it was announced, he goes to the basketball game. And there was a 60 Minutes interview that I was watching with him. And he said, when I got to the campus, man, I knew it was going to be kind of dead, but he said, I just couldn't imagine how little passion there was. And he goes to the basketball game, and instead of just taking the microphone and saying, just get behind us, give us time. We're going to work for you. We'll build a program you can be proud of, and just the usual modest sound bites. He starts out saying Ohio State sucks, but Michigan sucks too, and Purdue sucks. And he's just saying all this stuff to energize. He's trying to light a fire under a fan base that, quite frankly, is just used to losing at football. They follow football until about the first Saturday in November, and then it switches to Assembly Hall there in Bloomington, where they watch their basketball team. But he has changed the mindset, not only of the team, and you can certainly do that more readily and more quickly in the age of the transfer portal, which they've utilized as well as anyone. But he has also changed the mindset of the fans, and to see these fans, the way that they went out to the Rose Bowl, in the numbers that they went, with the passion they went. And you talking about a hunger, man, it's so far back that they, last were in these types of games. It's just incredible. So, yeah, Kirk Signetti's he's the guy. He's the glue, and I think he's going to win a national championship this year.
Largest living alumni base in the country, the Indiana University. So the ride up is always the most fun, the most exciting, and it's part of your job as a head coach is exciting that fan base to some private donations. And by the signs of the transfer portal the last couple of years, they're not going anywhere. So you can start some construction on expanding that stadium and doing whatever it has, but Cincinnati getting a lot of coaches fired out there a lot quicker than normal. Also, Paul and I will be back later in the week. We'll look at a full college basketball schedule and try and give you some winners there later in the week. And then next week, we'll close out our college football podcast with the breakdown for this year's national championship. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott here on the College Sports Rush YouTube channel, brought to you by our friends at Bet Rivers.